here is the graph as to why this YouTube channel has even been started, and that is my GG graph last year, shot taking high stakes. What's up guys, Ben and Babby here, and welcome to the very first episode of Road Back to High Stakes on this new YouTube channel. So some of you may know I posted on 2+2 and Instagram where I would share hands and graphs and daily results. The goal was to share my results transparently so I could give a bit of a picture into what it is like to be a professional poker player day to day. The reason I stopped is because I didn't really feel that it had much direction and I was kind of just doing the same thing over and over again. But I have wanted to do something, provide some kind of content, both for my own enjoyment and for the community. And it just so happened that I had a horrendous downswing last year on GG, shot taking 5k and 10k. Now, with a bit of hindsight, it seems like a great opportunity to rebuild from that and also share the journey with the community. So as you can see, I lost about 110k in EV, and in buy-ins, I lost about 35 buy-ins. And I think it's fair to say by no means a bad downswing. This is a very, very standard downswing over a pretty small sample. It's certainly not the first time I've lost 35 buy-ins in 90,000 hands. In fact, definitely to the contrary, I've lost way, way, way more buy-ins in way, way, way fewer hands. It is more that this was over the entire year, and pretty much, as you can see, for the first maybe 8 months of the year, I didn't have any joy in any month that I was playing high stakes. And that is the real sticking point for me that I struggled with the most, which it felt like every time I sat down to play high stakes, I would just lose. And I'm sure that is actually something that a lot of people can relate to, because when we shot take, whether or not it's moving from 2NL to 5NL or 100NL to 500NL, it always feels more challenging because you lose so much more money when you lose buy-ins. And naturally, we get used to it, but there is always going to be a teething phase. And for me, playing 5k and 10k definitely was the most mentally challenging step up that I've experienced. So at the moment I'm playing the majority of my volume at 2k on Ignition, 1k on GG, I'm not playing any 5k on GG at the moment, and then 2k and 3k and a sprinkling of 5k on ACR. So it isn't so much that I'm not rolled to be shot taking 5k and 10k at the moment, it's more that off the back of last year, I still kind of have that feeling of memory of what it is like to be shot taking 5k and 10k. And the stresses that do come with that and the monetary swings that come daily and monthly with that. I'm very aware that I can still lose and win the same number of buy-ins, but it's very different when your average stake is around 2k/NL as opposed to 5k or 4k or 8k/NL. So that's the reason that at the moment I really want to rebuild a bit of stability really by playing 1k, 2k and some 3k. So on to today's hands. We have got one of the biggest punts I have ever seen from a reg, and that isn't clickbait in my very first video, that is genuinely true. I also try and dust off 280 big blinds to a reg, and then we also have a super interesting potential theory blunder versus one of the best regs in the 1k GG pool. So the first hand this week, we've got ace-10 offsuit in the cutoff, and we open and get cold called on the button by a large recreational player. And yes, I'm going to get my excuses in as early as possible. This recreational has a note on them that says that they cold called deuce 4 suited, button versus under the gun. So obviously they're extremely wide. I go ahead and check the flop, and we see a pretty quick half pot stab in position. I think both options are fine here. I think generally calling is probably the standard option, but given that their cold calling range probably has around 30 to 35% equity, assuming they have hands like deuce 4 suited and random king 4 and stuff like that, I do elect to raise on this occasion. And the recreational quickly calls. We see a queen of spades on the turn, which I think is fair to say that a recreational will see this as a scare card. A queen, a king, and an ace are often going to be cards that recreationals are pretty afraid of. And obviously, in theory, a queen is just going to be very good for our check raising range. That said, I think we can assume that recreational doesn't have the hands like deuce 4 and king 5 that I said on the flop, but I think they can definitely have some king queen, ace queen, and then a whole host of 6x pairs, flush draws, etc. I think it's fine to have multiple sizes here. I just want to reiterate, do not do that versus a reg, just versus recreationals. So I don't mind sizing up big with my bluffs and maybe some of my more vulnerable holdings, my vulnerable strong holdings, and then maybe blocking or half potting with more mergy value like pocket 8s through pocket jacks. Villain quite quickly calls, and we see a 3 of hearts. So all things considered, I would say that this is probably one of the best rivers I could expect to see. It obviously fills up our flushes, we have a nut blocker, and also there are just going to be loads of hands that the recreational may have called flop and turn with that are now more likely to fold. Hands like pocket 4s, pocket 5, 6x, obviously 9-8 we're winning, but we don't really want to check call our combo. I think it's even conceivable that maybe some of that ace queen, king queen might fold on the river. So I do think that the play that's going to make us the most money here is going to be shoving. With that in mind, I go ahead and shove for just around pot, a bit more than pot. Check the deuce 4 suited note one more time. And we do get turbo snapped by a7 of spades. And here we have ace 4 of spades on a deep ante table. Everyone is at least 200 big blinds deep. I make my very first mistake here and 3-bet way too small. We should be going a lot bigger here. We see a tank and a cold 4-bet from the small blind, who is a reg I am not familiar with. They go 3x, which seems good. I think our options here are both to call and 5-bet, but on this occasion I did decide to just call. We see queen 9-8 with a flush draw, and we do expect to see a number of checks from the out of position player here. The reason for that is that in position here hits his board so well. They flop straight, they flop more sets, and yeah, just have a huge range advantage. Out of position checks, which we expected to see quite often, and now I'm considering whether or not I want to bluff my hand. I decide that I do want to bluff my hand, and the sizing that I want to use is going to be around quarter pots. I think for this sizing we get to bet very liberally. A lot of our 8x, 9x, pocket 10s, pocket jacks, queen x, flush draws, bluffs. Villain quite long tanks and then calls. I think when villain does call on the flop, their range is actually very well defined to overpairs, queen x, pocket 10s, pocket jacks, some flush draws. I don't think there's going to be any ace king, no diamond in there. It's going to be very narrow to those hands. On the turn, I'm considering what I want to do with my hand, and I do decide that bluffing is going to be a good option here, at least some of the time. I need to pick my bet sizes now. And I now think on the flop I was going to be betting hands like queen, jack and 10s, as I said. I don't really want to build my betting structure around a queen now. I think I want to polarize given how deep we are and how advantageous this card is for us. So I decide not to bet any hands like ace, queen, queen, jack, and I decide just to polarize up to 2 pairs and sets and straights. My bet sizing reflects that, and I go 2/3 pot. We get a very long tank again, and villain does call. It's totally conceivable that out of position here can have jack x of diamonds here or pocket jacks. However, this is just going to be the most unbelievable range hitting card for us, and I think it would be a criminal offense not to bluff this combo once we arrive. With that in mind, I do always shove for the last 170 big blinds, and villain goes deep into the tank, and fortunately this time ends up folding. And here we have the potential theory blunder of the week, where we get an open from one of the best players in the 1k pool, and I go ahead and 3-bet ace king offsuit in the small blind. And we see queen 6 deuce with a flush draw. Now there are a number of strategies you can use here. You could even do some blocking if you want. You can do some half potting, you can do some 2/3 potting. I elect to go 2/3 pot, but I'm not fussed either way what you choose to do in this spot. I think our suits are pretty great to be betting the flop with, at least a lot of the time. So on this occasion, I do go ahead and bet 2/3 pot. Villain tanks for a while and does call. We see an 8 of diamonds on the turn, and I think that the in-position player here is going to have defended plenty of underpairs with a spade. There's going to be some 6x, which is obviously not going to be folding the turn with 5 outs. And then there's going to be some ace 10, ace jack, maybe a bit of king jack, king 10 of clubs, but I think maybe versus the 2/3 pot on the flop, those might fold mostly. I actually haven't checked the sim for this, so I don't actually know. Either way, I do think there are very good merits to betting our combo on the turn, and on this occasion, that is what I decide to go ahead and do. The sizing that I use is half pot. I could be convinced that bigger would be better here, but I think half pot is fine. Villain again goes into a deep tank and calls. So we see the 6 of diamonds on the river. We need to think about our combo now. So obviously there's going to be those hands with clubs that we've mentioned, ace 10 and ace jack, that would have folded the turn. So not holding club is not really relevant anymore. The ace of diamonds is a pretty nice unblocker. In fact, it does block ace queen. Now, the King of Spades, which is the main interesting card. So the positives for our King of Spades are that we do block combos of King Queen. We also block combos of King 6 and King 8 of Spades, which I imagine, well, certainly King 6 always calls. King 8 probably calls mostly, unblocking the bluffs. Now, the negatives for my combo for bluffing are that in position is going to be folding cards with the King of Spades, i.e. King 9, King 10, King Jack, King 7 of Spades. So I think it's pretty clear to see that we do want to be checking our combo on the river and not bluffing it. We then get another long tank from in position, and we do see a shove for just over half pot. So I think we can all agree that having the Ace of Spades here would just be infinitely better of a calling card here, given in position is going to be checking back their nut flush draws the majority of the time on the river, in fact always on the river, and they're going to be forced into bluffing the King of Spades. That said, I think that there is some argument blocking King Queen and King 6, as I mentioned before, that kind of tips our hand back in the direction of at least maybe wanting to mix call. I think maybe a very good way of randomizing this would just be to always call the combos with the Ace of Spades and always fold the hands with the King of Spades. Sadly for me, on this occasion, apparently I was not thinking very well, and I decided that the King Queen and King 6 combos made up enough for me to justify calling, but on this occasion we do get shown the Queen Jack of Diamonds. So I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts on this one. Do we think this is just a pure punt? I think flop and turn are going to be justifiable by most people. But on the river, do I just have to accept this as a punt, or do we think that we can just about justify calling this combo sometimes? Let me know in the comments. And lastly, this week, we have got the biggest punt that I've seen in a very, very long time. So we are to the flop of 9-5-4 the flush draw, and we have defended a 3-bet cutoff versus the big blind. So we see half pot from villain, and I'm going to be raising sets never on this texture, so I go ahead and call. So we see a Jack of Hearts on the turn, which is a very, very high equity card for the out of position player. They turn way more Jack X than in position, and a Jack, a Queen, and a King are going to be extremely high barrels, maybe even close to range barrels for the out of position player. We see this reflected in the bet on the turn from villain, and they've chosen 70% pot. Certainly on the larger side, but I have absolutely no complaints with the sizing. It's completely good. I'm never going to be shoving sets in position here. I'm going to be shoving some Jack X, some flush draws, some combos and that kind of thing, but I'm never going to be shoving this combo. Now we see another incredible card for the out of position player, the King of Hearts. We are expecting to see a lot of shoves from out of position here, and when they do check, they're going to be massively over check folding, theory over check folding. So we are very sad to see a tank and then a check from out of position, clearest value shove of all time. But once we do shove, villain doesn't really give their hand much thought, and they very, very, very quickly call an extremely speculative Ace Queen offsuit, no spade. I mean, this is a wild, wild, wild cooldown. I can actually see why the villain has called this combo. Obviously, like in position is going to have to bluff like all of their misstraight draws, the double gutted 8-7 on the turn. But I'm also just going to be checking back my flush draws here for some EV, I guess. I mean, it's a Wild West and a street poker hand, and I've got a lot of time for it. But at the same time, it is just going to have to be an Omega torch from my perspective. So I really hope you enjoyed the hands and the video this week. As I'm sure you can tell, we're pretty much making this up as I go along. So any feedback would be super, super helpful. So until next time, take care and good luck at the tables.